If I told you that Russia has just achieved its greatest victory since the end of the Cold War without firing a single shot, would you believe it? This morning, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced a decision unprecedented in the past 7 decades. Germany is withdrawing from NATO's energy sanctions and signing a massive gas agreement with Russia. $12 billion per year, 40,000 jobs, and a slap in the face of Washington. This is not about diplomacy. This is not about economics alone. This is about the survival of a nation and the unraveling of the most powerful alliance in the world. Today I will show you, why did Germany have to do this? What weapon did Russia use to win without war? And what will happen to NATO and to the entire world after this decision? But first, we need to understand how Germany reached such a desperate situation. Look at these numbers. Numbers that Western media does not want to mention. 23%. This is the decline in Germany's industrial production since Russia cut off gas supplies in 2022. To put this into perspective, this is a worse decline than during the Great Depression of 1929, when the global economy collapsed and millions lost their jobs. But this time, it is not a financial crisis. This is an energy crisis. A far more dangerous type of crisis because it strikes directly at the productive foundation of an industrial nation. 340%. This number represents the increase in energy costs faced by German manufacturers. Think about it. If your household electricity bill more than tripled, where would you cut spending? Would you eat less? Use air conditioning less? Turn off the lights earlier? But what if you are a chemical plant, an automobile manufacturer, a steel mill? You cannot simply turn off machines. You cannot produce half a car. You either operate at full capacity or shut down completely. And that is exactly what is happening in Germany. Volkswagen, the symbol of the German automotive industry, a company that has existed for nearly 100 years and is a source of national pride, is moving production lines to China and the US. BASF, the world's largest chemical corporation with a 157-year history, is shutting down plants in Germany and shifting to Asia. Siemens, the engineering and technology giant, is doing the same. These are not normal business decisions. This is the largest industrial migration in modern German history, but those are just the large corporations with the resources to relocate. What about the thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises, family businesses that have survived for generations? They have no choice but to close. Tens of thousands of workers lose their jobs. Industrial towns become ghost towns. And what about ordinary people? German households now spend 18% of their average income on energy bills. Imagine this. Out of every 100 million dong you earn per month, 18 million goes straight to electricity, water, and heating. For a family earning 3,000 euros per month, this means 540 euros just to keep the house warm and the lights on. This is the largest cost of living crisis since East and West Germany reunified in 1990. Germans, accustomed to one of the highest standards of living in the world, suddenly face the choice between heating and eating. Food banks report surging demand. Elderly people must choose between buying medicine and paying electricity bills. This is not a scene in a developing country. This is Germany, the world's fourth largest economy. Meanwhile, compare energy prices. Russian pipeline gas used to cost only $300 per 1,000 cubic meters. This was a stable, predictable price that allowed businesses to plan long term. But now, LNG from the US costs $840 per 1,000 cubic meters, nearly 280% more expensive, and that is just the gas price. Not to mention the cost of building LNG terminals, the cost of liquefied gas transport ships, the cost of regasification. All of these costs are ultimately passed on to German consumers and businesses. And who is paying for all of this? German taxpayers. The German government has spent tens of billions of euros subsidizing energy costs, money that could have been invested in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. And this is what NATO and Washington failed to account for: politics in a democracy. Alternative for Germany, abbreviated as AfD, a party Western media labels as far right and populist, is polling at 28% in the latest surveys. To understand what this means, this is the highest level of support for a right-wing party in Germany since World War II. They are campaigning on a simple but powerful message: energy sovereignty for Germany. End sanctions that hurt German workers while enriching U.S. energy corporations. Put Germany back to work. And this message is spreading. Even traditional supporters of Scholz's Social Democratic Party, people who have always supported the transatlantic alliance, are beginning to ask questions. Why must we sacrifice our industry, our jobs, and our family living standards for Ukraine's territorial integrity, while the U.S. sacrifices nothing comparable? Why are U.S. energy companies earning record profits, selling expensive LNG to Europe while German workers lose their jobs? These are not questions from Putin's supporters. These are questions from ordinary people bearing the consequences of geopolitical decisions. Scholz, an experienced politician, understands this political dynamic well. He knows that if he does not act, if the situation continues to deteriorate, he will not only lose personal power, but lose the government to AfD. And a Germany led by AfD would not simply sign an agreement with Russia. They could withdraw from NATO entirely. They could completely reverse German foreign policy. So in a sense, Scholz's decision is not a betrayal of NATO. It is a last-ditch effort to salvage what remains of the transatlantic relationship while still meeting the urgent needs of the German people. This is the context, the immense economic and political pressure that led to the historic decision. But the next question is, how was this agreement signed? And why did it cause such shock? This is the part I think you will find most interesting and most alarming. How could an agreement of such scale and strategic importance be negotiated and signed without the CIA, supposedly the most powerful and capable intelligence agency in the world, knowing anything about it? How could NATO, an organization with an intelligence sharing system among 30 members, be completely caught off guard? According to leaked sources from European officials and reports from investigative journalists, the picture is gradually emerging. Negotiations were not conducted in Berlin or Moscow, where Western intelligence agencies have a strong presence and can easily monitor activity. Instead, they were carried out through intermediaries in Switzerland, specifically in Geneva, a long neutral city with a tradition of banking secrecy and discreet diplomacy. Geneva is the perfect place for this kind of secret diplomacy. It lies outside NATO territory, it has strict confidentiality laws, and it has a long history as a meeting place for sensitive negotiations. German officials reportedly used private lawyers and business consultants as intermediaries. These individuals met with representatives from Russian energy companies who themselves were not official government officials. All meetings were arranged to look like ordinary business discussions. No large diplomatic delegations, no flag-bearing vehicles, nothing to draw attention. Meanwhile, on the public surface, German officials continued to maintain a hardline stance supporting sanctions against Russia. Scholz continued making statements about solidarity with Ukraine. German ministers continued attending NATO meetings and reaffirming their commitment to the alliance. This was a perfect disguise. No one suspected that behind the scenes, a major deal was being negotiated. And the Russian side? They played their role perfectly as well. Russian energy companies, especially Gazprom, began preparing pipeline materials months in advance. They ordered steel, they arranged contracts with contractors, they prepared pipe-laying ships. All of this was done under the guise of maintaining existing pipelines or domestic projects. No one realized they were preparing for Nord Stream 3. This level of coordination and planning shows that the negotiations were not a matter of weeks or months. This was a carefully planned operation over at least 6 months, possibly a year. Both sides knew that if discovered too early, pressure from Washington and other NATO countries could derail the deal before completion, so they maintained absolute secrecy until the final moment. And the strategy worked. On the morning of the announcement, when Scholz stood before the media and revealed the decision, it was a complete shock to NATO, to Washington, and even to many members of the German government. Intelligence analysts are now facing difficult questions about what they missed, and the simple answer is they were looking for the wrong signals. They were monitoring official diplomatic channels. They were listening to state-level phone calls. But the real negotiations were happening in private boardrooms through civilian channels, in the language of business rather than diplomacy. This is an important lesson about the limits of traditional intelligence in the modern world. So, what exactly does the Nord Stream 3 agreement include? Why is it so important? First, scale and capacity. The pipeline will have the capacity to transport 80 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year. To put that into context, this is enough to meet all of Germany's industrial demand with surplus for export to neighboring countries like Austria, the Czech Republic, and even parts of France. This would be one of the largest gas pipelines in the world. Second, the route, and this is where the design becomes truly smart from a strategic perspective. The pipeline will run under the Baltic Sea, from the Russian coast through international waters directly to the German coast. It completely bypasses the territory of Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Why does this matter? Because it means Germany is no longer dependent on transit countries that in the past have repeatedly threatened or actually cut gas supplies for political reasons. It means no country can blackmail Germany by threatening to turn off the valve. It means Germany gains real energy security. From Germany's perspective, this is a non-negotiable feature. Third, direct economic benefits. The project will create approximately 40,000 jobs for German workers during the roughly 3-year construction phase. These are well-paid jobs in engineering, welding, construction, and logistics. Once completed, the pipeline will generate around $12 billion per year for the German economy through transit fees, maintenance services, and related activities. For a struggling economy, this is a significant revenue stream. But the greatest benefit is energy prices. With stable and cheaper gas supplies, production costs will fall sharply. Companies can compete again in global markets. Households will see energy bills decline. The entire economy will benefit. Fourth, and this may be the most important part from a long-term strategic perspective, are the technology cooperation clauses. Germany will gain access to Russian nuclear technology, particularly in next-generation reactors and nuclear waste management. Germany will be able to participate in space cooperation projects with Russia, and most importantly, German chemical and pharmaceutical companies will regain access to rare earth elements, specialized compounds, and raw materials that U.S. sanctions had blocked. For companies like BASF, this means the ability to produce products they were forced to stop making or buy from Chinese competitors at higher prices. But there is one aspect of the deal that few noticed at first, yet has far-reaching implications. That is the payment mechanism. All transactions related to Nord Stream 3 will be conducted through a bilateral ruble-euro payment system, completely bypassing the Western-controlled SWIFT system and the dollar-based financial network. What does this mean? It means Germany is helping create an alternative financial architecture operating independently of U.S. oversight and control. It means these transactions cannot be frozen or sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury. It means Germany is laying the groundwork for a multipolar monetary system where the dollar is no longer the sole reserve currency and all transactions do not have to pass through U.S. banks. From Washington's perspective, this is not simply an energy deal. This is a direct challenge to the foundation of U.S. power, dollar dominance. And this is why the reaction from Washington and NATO has been so intense. The response from NATO headquarters in Brussels came faster than even I expected. Within less than 3 hours after Scholz's live television announcement, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg convened an emergency meeting of the North Atlantic Council. This is NATO's highest decision-making body, including representatives from all 30 member states. Stoltenberg, a veteran diplomat and former Norwegian Prime Minister, is known for his calm demeanor and conciliatory skills. But this time, his tone in the summons was unusually firm. He demanded immediate explanations from German representatives regarding this unilateral decision violating the spirit of NATO solidarity. He emphasized that energy decisions with strategic implications must be consulted with allies. He warned of serious consequences for alliance cohesion, but what happened next stunned everyone. German representatives did not appear at the meeting. They were not late. They did not send deputies. They simply did not come. Berlin sent a brief text message stating that senior officials were occupied with urgent domestic matters and would provide a written explanation within 48 hours. This was unprecedented in NATO's 75-year history. Never before had a founding member, one of the alliance's pillars, openly ignored a summons from the Secretary-General. Never had a country unilaterally refused to participate in an emergency meeting on such a critical issue. This action, or rather inaction, sent a clearer message than any statement. Germany no longer views NATO as the primary forum for making its foreign policy decisions. Washington's reaction was even harsher and more specific. Less than 6 hours after Scholz's announcement, the U.S. Treasury issued a statement warning that any company involved in the Nord Stream 3 project, regardless of nationality, would face secondary sanctions under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. This means these companies would be cut off from the U.S. financial system, unable to trade in dollars, and denied access to U.S. markets. For large multinational corporations, this is a serious threat. Being cut off from the U.S. financial system could mean bankruptcy. But Berlin was prepared for this move. Within 2 hours, the German Minister of Economic Affairs held a press conference and issued a statement so strong it stunned many observers. He said, and I quote, "The German government considers any attempt to impose sanctions on German companies for participating in lawful energy projects to be an act of economic warfare against a sovereign European nation. We will defend our companies by all available means, including legal, economic, and diplomatic measures. We will also call on the European Union to enact countermeasures to protect Europe's economic sovereignty." Let me emphasize this. A German official used the term economic warfare to describe potential actions by the U.S., Germany's closest ally for more than 7 decades. This is not careful diplomatic language. This is not a disagreement masked by polite phrasing. This is open, direct, and unmistakable confrontation. But why is Germany so confident? Why are they not afraid of the consequences of challenging U.S. power? The answer lies in simple but undeniable strategic math. Consider America's options. Option 1. Military threats or military action against Germany. This is clearly impossible. Germany is a NATO member. Attacking Germany would mean attacking the alliance itself, triggering Article 5 and potentially leading to full-scale war in Europe. No U.S. administration, no matter how hawkish, could consider this. Option 2. Impose comprehensive economic sanctions on Germany. Theoretically possible, but practically disastrous. Germany is the world's 4th largest economy and the economic engine of the European Union. Sanctioning Germany would devastate transatlantic trade, harm U.S. companies operating in Germany, and force other European countries to choose sides between the U.S. and Germany. In the current energy crisis, most European countries would side with Germany because they too need cheap energy. The result would not be Germany's isolation but America's isolation from Europe. Option 3. Diplomatic isolation of Germany in international organizations. Again, unrealistic. Germany has too many allies, too many trade relationships, and too much political influence to be isolated. Moreover, attempting to isolate Germany would only further weaken institutions the U.S. seeks to protect, such as NATO and the United Nations. Scholz and his advisors calculated all of this carefully. They understand that Washington is in a strategic dilemma. The U.S. cannot afford to lose Germany without collapsing the entire transatlantic security architecture built since 1949. But the U.S. also cannot allow Germany to break NATO unity and cooperate with Russia without eroding its own credibility and power. This is a lose-lose situation from Washington's perspective, and that is exactly what Berlin is counting on. Now let me talk about what I believe is the most brilliant, most subtle, and most troubling part of this entire story. The strategy Russia used to achieve this outcome, because this is not about military power. This is about what strategists call hybrid warfare or fourth-generation warfare, where victory is achieved not with guns but with economics, psychology, and time. Russia, under Putin's leadership, did not fire a single bullet at Germany. They did not hack Germany's power grid. They did not conduct large-scale disinformation campaigns against the German population. They did not fund extremist political parties. All the things Western media often accuse Russia of doing, they did not do in this case. So what did they do? Step 1. Maintain energy infrastructure. This sounds simple but is critically important. Throughout the most heavily sanctioned period in modern history, when Russia's economy was under attack from all sides, when many predicted Russia would collapse, Moscow continued investing in its energy sector. They maintained pipelines, even when not operating at full capacity. They maintained gas fields, even as European demand dropped sharply. They retained skilled workers, paying wages despite insufficient work. Why? Because they knew Europe's energy crisis could not last forever. They knew that one day, economic reality would force Europe to return to the cheapest and most reliable energy supply, Russian pipeline gas. And when that day came, Russia had to be ready to deliver. If they had let infrastructure decay, if they had fired engineers and welders, if they had shut down gas fields, then even if Europe wanted to return, Russia could not supply quickly enough. The opportunity would be lost. This is a perfect example of long-term strategic thinking, willing to endure short-term losses for long-term gain. Step 2. Strategic patience. Russia did not rush. They did not try to negotiate with Europe immediately after sanctions were imposed. They did not offer reconciliation or compromise. Instead, they simply waited. They allowed Europe's energy crisis to develop naturally and worsen. They let energy prices rise to unbearable levels. They let factories close one by one. They let European citizens grow angry at their governments. They let opposition parties weaponize energy issues against incumbent governments. Moscow understands a basic principle of politics in democracies. Economic pressure always turns into political pressure. When people suffer, they demand action from politicians. And if politicians do nothing, they are replaced by those who promise to act. This is not conspiracy or manipulation. This is simply how democracy works. And Russia patiently waited for this process to unfold naturally. Step 3. Perfect timing. Russia did not present the Nord Stream 3 offer until the moment was fully ripe. They waited until polls in Germany showed AfD rising. They waited until major corporations began threatening to move production abroad. They waited until Scholz faced a real risk of losing power. And then they made an offer designed to be impossible to refuse. Thank you for watching.